Right. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to this month's lunchtime webinar brought to you by the Animal Welfare Foundation. We're very pleased to have you here for this talk, Is Farm Animal Welfare Being Overlooked in Favour of Production? And we will have some polls throughout this presentation. So a QR code and login details will present on the screen. And you can vote anonymously to the questions that are up there. So just have your phones handy so you can participate. And yeah, it's my pleasure to hand you over to our speaker today, Matthew Dobbs. Matt was a trustee of the Animal Welfare Foundation for many years, and yeah, we're lucky to have him continue to offer these talks for us. So thanks very much, Matt. I'll hand over to you.
Great. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to have you all available. If you feel free to put your camera on, give me a wave. I'm very happy to take as many questions as you want on today's subject, either throughout the presentation or feel free to share them at the end. You can also share them via the Slido, as I will demonstrate in a minute. What gives me the right to be able to speak to you about farm animal welfare? Well, certainly I don't have any right to do that, but I have a little experience. My early career was in academia. I worked at the University of Sydney, UC Davis, and at the Royal Veterinary College for many years, running the farm animal clinic there. I then spent a bit of time in clinical practice, had a chain of veterinary groups focusing on farm animal care and service delivery. Myself, mostly a dairy vet throughout my career, and latterly mostly involved in agri-tech. So looking at the interface with technology, and a big driver for me is how can technology help improve farm animal welfare for the future, and look at the other benefits that technology, agri-technology can bring, such as improving production efficiency, the benefits it might have around carbon mitigation, and also obviously health as well as welfare. And so that's me. Just as a little warmer, if you haven't heard me speak before, this will be new, but if you have heard me speak before, I like to start with this story. And basically, it's if you would like a free car upgrade, then just listen very carefully. So a few years ago, I was lucky enough to be working over in the US, and I arrived in the US and got off the plane, went to the car hire desk and booked my car hire. And the car hire agent said to me, Dr. Dobbs, would like to give you a complimentary upgrade to a Cadillac. I said, oh, that's wonderful. I don't normally get that sort of treatment when I hire a car. I'm delighted to accept a free car upgrade. But please tell me, why are you giving me a free car upgrade? And he said, Dr. Dobbs, it's because you're a vet. And I looked at him a little confused, and then the penny dropped. He then carried on saying, Dr. Dobbs, we would just like to thank you and all the other veterans that have helped us in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I, unfortunately, although masquerading as a war veteran, am not a former member of the armed forces, but I am a veterinary surgeon, a farm animal veterinary surgeon. But, you know, if you ever want a car upgrade and you're going to the US, just put your job title down as vet, and maybe somebody will misappropriate you with a free car upgrade as well. So today I'd like to be able to talk to you a little bit about whether farm animal welfare is being overlooked in favour of production. And so that is our first question on Slido today. So hopefully you can all see my screen. If somebody could just shout out or nod that they can see that. The first question today on Slido, if you don't have the Slido app, please use your QR code, use QR scanner on your phone, scan the QR code, you'll be able to download Slido, and you will be able to answer the question, which is the basis for today's discussion. Is farm animal welfare being overlooked in favour of production? Clearly, lots of different drivers in today's economy around growing protein production, around an increasing proteinaceous diet. Fast food is full of meat and milk products, cheese products, and so there are lots of drivers around production. But we also know that as the custodians of animal health, as veterinary surgeons, it's really important that we make sure that farm animal welfare is being maintained. And so I'd love to know where people think that balance currently sits. So we've still got a few more votes coming in at the moment, and overwhelmingly it looks like that people feel that probably at the moment farm animal welfare is being overlooked in favour of production. Everybody is saying yes to some extent, either yes often, or yes always, or yes sometimes. Okay, anybody else want to vote? And you'll have more chance, and we're going to come back to this question at the end of the presentation today as well, to see whether my presentation today has had any impact as to whether you think welfare is being overlooked. Okay, so hopefully you all know who I am. Wanted to tell you very briefly a little bit about who the Animal Welfare Foundation are. I was a trustee for 6 years. It is the BVA's charity, the British Veterinary Association's charity, a science-led charity supporting the veterinary profession and to help champion animal welfare. And as a charity, we raise funds and then spend those funds on the good causes that you can see there. We fund new research into animal welfare. We provide a platform for debate on animal welfare issues. Animal welfare, certainly, as we'll find out today, is not a black and white matter. And we are aiming to support the next generation of animal welfare advocates, people that can really help to be those guardians, those custodians of animal welfare for the future. We work with students a lot, and I know most of you today are from our student body. You really are the next generation that we want to support, encourage, guide, mentor, and enthuse to get involved with animal welfare. So you can do that in a number of different ways. We'd love you to apply for one of our AWF student grants to help you on your research development and a career maybe in research. We'd love to host more of these animal welfare talks at your own university. There's a whole cadre, a whole library of these talks with some great vets that are involved with the Welfare Foundation and veterinary nurses who can deliver other topics and other courses around animal welfare. We've got a whole load of case studies that you can download. We run our flagship Animal Welfare Forum, which is coming up very soon in May. So please have a look for that. If you haven't already done so, consider registering. We'd love to see you along at that event. And you can subscribe via our website also for updates so that you can receive our newsletter. And last but not leastly, please stay in touch with us on our social media channels as well. Like us, share us, and follow us, please. Grab the QR code again if you want to get any information on AWF. Okay, so today we're going to talk about farm animal welfare, and I'm going to start with a quote from Oscar Wilde, which is knowing the price of everything but the value of nothing. And what does that actually mean? And what I want to ask all our audience today is, are our ethical, our moral, our philosophical and our cultural values, those things that we hold dear to who makes us who we are, and us as a society who we are, and us as a global population who we are those values on par with financial or economic value? Farm animal production has changed dramatically over the years, particularly since the Second World War. Since the Second World War, we've overtly had a farming industry that has focused around production. After the Second World War, we were short of food in this country. We had rationing up until the early 50s. And UK farmers were told to focus on becoming more efficient, more productive. But is that the right way still for us to be going now as an industry. And for those of us that are involved with that industry, and the vet is a crucial part of the team that helps support health, welfare and production of our livestock and our farmed animals, should that focus still be around production, or is there something missing? Does the veterinary industry have a role in our environment and our landscape and the way that farm animals interact with that landscape and help us create that landscape? Should vets be involved with the carbon economy, with mitigating the effects of keeping livestock on our environment, on climate change? What role should vets do to help to mitigate carbon and methane output from ruminants, for example? Or what role should vets have in helping to manage and maintain animals at pasture, or in any of the other wonderful geographical locations where we're able to keep farm animals? Ruminants in particular are able to convert grass into a protein source. So they're able to take what is sometimes seen as unproductive land that is only capable of growing grass, maybe mountainous areas or felllands, and is able to convert that into a useful product for society in terms of the meat and milk that come from ruminants. And so, maybe there is a crucial role that vets should play in environmental matters. And the last area is around society. What role do vets have and farm vets have in helping livestock in terms of the societal good that farm animals bring? I remember a few years ago when my children were younger, every bedtime story they wanted to read involved some farm animal or other. And farming is integral to us as a species. We have kept animals for our benefit now for thousands and thousands of years. And so it's crucial for us to understand what our guardianship and custodial role should be in maintaining that livestock population for the future. And so when we look at, what we should be doing ethically, morally and philosophically, it does include things like asking whether we should be keeping animals for proteins as a protein source or not. And if we do decide to keep those, morally, we should look about how we keep them and in what way we keep them and why we keep them. Philosophically, we could ask ourselves, do we have the right to keep animals for our benefit? And many people are asking those sorts of deep and meaningful questions. And then interestingly, culturally, we know what an important part farming has played in our island and in the development of Western society. And that may well be changing now, as, for example, in the UK, less than 1% of the population are directly involved in agriculture and producing food. Food currently accounts for about 13% of the household budget. But you only have to go back about 80 years to the early 1950s when rationing was still in place, when food would account for somewhere between 55 and 60% of the household budget. So you can see we've managed to drive tremendous efficiencies into our food supply chain, primarily driven by making animals more efficient in producing that protein. But is now the right time to start to take a step back and think about what is the price of creating a cheap source of protein food from the animals that are under our care? Okay, so now time, before you fall asleep, to ask my second question on Slido. What role do we think the livestock vet therefore should have? We've talked about some of those early in my introduction, but what sort of role should the livestock animal vet have on farm? So have a look at that. Do you think our role as a livestock vet should be for health purposes only, for health and welfare, for health, welfare and production? And what should be the link between those two? And maybe you think out of those three things, between looking after an animal's health, attesting to its welfare, and helping the animal keeper make sure that they have higher production. Maybe there's a different split. Maybe you think that the vet's role should be just around health and production, or maybe welfare and production. After all, at the end of the day, our paymaster, the person paying the bill, is the farmer, and without those animals being productive, then possibly they might start to question the role that a vet may have. Others of you may think that our overriding obligation is to support the animal's welfare, and we may get on to touch whether health and welfare have the same outcome. Is it because you have a healthy animal that you also have an animal that has high welfare, or might there be some difference between those two? Okay, so looks like you've all had a chance to vote. Most people thinking that the vet's role is covering all of those three areas: health, welfare, and production. A number are feeling, however, that health and welfare specifically are overridingly important, and that any production issues or gains aren't for the vet to be involved with. Okay, let's see if we can expand on that a little bit. Well, my personal opinion is that we, as a profession, have a role to play in all three of those areas. Certainly, as a practicing farm animal vet, I would be involved in day-to-day issues around infectious disease, making sure that a group of calves wasn't suffering from causes of scour or causes of pneumonia, ensuring that hygiene issues and all the diseases that are caused by poor hygiene are addressed, mastitis in a dairy cow, for example. And so, health is an important part of our undergraduate training, and it would be remiss of me to not mention health, as a large part of what you study as an undergraduate is around ill health and how you can address ill health in our food producing animals. I would also say that we have a big role in production. Ultimately, the animals that we are keeping are all being kept for a purpose, for their meat, their milk, or their fibre. And if they're not productive, then they won't be kept. It's as simple as that. We're keeping these animals for the benefits that they bring to society. And so we need to assist the farmer with that level of production. And production can cover a whole host of things. Clearly, all of these animals, whether they're being eaten or producing milk or fibre for us, will have to reproduce so that we have the new generation of productive animals. And a large part of the vet's role is to help with reproduction, which is by default assisting with their productive capacity. Metabolic disease itself has a role in production. We know that many of the ability for us to breed an animal, the genetics and the genomics of an animal, are often way in advance of our ability and our understanding to feed or keep the animal. And I think the vet has a huge role to play here in advising the farmer around management, around husbandry, to make sure that in their strive to grow and an animal that is productive, and in a strive to become more efficient as a farmer, as a producer, that health and welfare are not challenged as part of that process. So I think a vet has a crucial role in helping the farmer to address the issue around production. Unsurprisingly, you would also expect me to say, I also think the vet has a huge responsibility to welfare. And my belief is that welfare of an animal is very separate to their health. It is possible, for example, to farm an animal healthily, but not necessarily make sure that its welfare is fully attested to. And so therefore, I think it's important for those of us that are involved with farm animal production and as farm animal vets to play a strong role in welfare. And what should that be? Should that be a passive approach, simply calling out when we see a problem with welfare and asking the owner, the keeper, the farmer to address that? Or do we have a bigger role where we should be proactive in how we approach welfare? should we be educating, advising, acting as a mentor to encourage positive welfare or good welfare, such that we're not simply just reacting to a problem once it occurs, but we're helping producers to support welfare from part of our key role, our day-to-day job, working with farm animals and with their keepers. So the next thing I want to ask the group is around what happens around financial value and human value. So we've already spoken, the key topic of this discussion is around farmers' need to create financial value in their farm animals. They need ultimately to be able to sell the meat and the milk for them to survive. But does that mean that we as vets should only support the farmer in helping to create that financial value? Or do you think that we have a role to uphold our human values in the way that farm animals are kept and are managed, and in the role that we play on farm? So is it more important to create that financial value, after all, without which we probably wouldn't be in a job, because the farmer wouldn't be able to keep his animals and we would therefore not be able to provide him or her with a service? Or is it integral for us to uphold human value? And there's a little bit of naughtiness in my question, because I want to try and address what those two things mean and try and guide you as an audience when you're thinking about farm animal welfare as to which of these is important. At the end of the day, we're looking at market capabilities here. Do we believe, if we think that financial value is the only route that markets can fix and create everything, as long as we can ascribe a pound, shilling or pence to it, does that mean that we can enact a solution? Or do we need to uphold bigger values, and those by default will create possibly financial value along the way? Great, thank you for voting. Most people seem to think that it's very important to uphold our human values, some feeling that financial values are the most important, and maybe they feel that human values will follow if we get the financial value right. I'm actually going to spend the next few minutes arguing the opposite. I think that if we uphold our human values, that by default financial value will flow. And why do I think that? Why is it important to create financial value? Well, we've already said that if we don't create effective, efficient animals, they won't be kept. We won't have protein from animal sources as part of our diet. But also as part of that, I think it's absolutely right for us to uphold our human values as paramount. And as part of that, we need to sort of understand, what does society value as part of those human values? What does society want to achieve from us keeping farm animals? Do they simply want the cheapest beef burger or the cheapest bucket of chicken which they can consume after a night out at the pub on a Friday? Or do they want to uphold bigger values around how those animals are kept, what impact those animals may have had on the climate, and how is that integral to their overall sustainability? And this throws up a whole load of other questions about what we as farm animal vets should be involved with. So, for example, is good welfare consistent with climate care? So can we, for example, manage our animals to be more efficient, and therefore by being more efficient, they have a less detrimental effect on the environment? But is that also consistent with good welfare? And in many cases it is. If we can keep animals healthier, we know that they are naturally more productive, and by default that means that we need to keep less animals for the same output. And so therefore I would say that if we are able to attest to good welfare, that it's absolutely consistent with good climate care. Is welfare integral to sustainability? Well, definitely here in the UK, we have a huge respect for our kept animal population. We are literally a nation of animal lovers, whether it's the pets that we keep at home, but also our consumers do have an overriding, certainly against the global audience, have an overriding concern for the welfare of the animals that produce our food. And they want to see that as sustainable. Clearly, there has to be an economic balance. And we can see that with, for example, a number of the initiatives around chicken production over the last few years. We know that consumers in general want to see chicken production from animals that have had a good life. But there is always a cut-off point, whereas if that chicken has cost too much to produce, around maybe enhancing its welfare through its environment, then we know that consumers will vote with their pockets and chicken consumption will drop. So I think welfare is absolutely a crucial aspect that we need to discuss, and it can be linked to sustainability, whether that's climate care or whether that's the financial sustainability of the farm. It's about ensuring we get that right balance that meets the consumer demands for efficient protein production, that meets the environmental demands for efficient protein production, but also that doesn't challenge what we know to be the welfare standards that animals really should be kept to as we ask them to produce that protein for us. So one of the big questions we therefore need to ask is, what is our human values and what is the worth of our human existence, and what role do kept animals play as part of that? And I think we only have to look back to the recent history to see how we as a society do really value our human existence, and it isn't all about financial gain. I think if we look at the response to the global coronavirus pandemic, it demonstrates society's concern for us, as a population, and particularly our welfare and our health. A number of people suffered greatly as part of that global pandemic, and no more so probably than those people that lost businesses and livelihoods because of the lockdown. But you can see by the fact that as a society, we all took on the role responsibly of staying at home initially in the first phases, but then also in terms of all the requirements we had to try and limit the virus spread, willingly us as a society took on those measures, despite the fact that economically it probably wasn't the best thing for us as a nation to do. And so it's clear that society does have a value, a worth experience around us as our existence. And interestingly, it's for me is, how does that worth existence then extend to the animals that we keep for our benefit, whether those are our pets, but as the topic of conversation today is around our farmed animals. And that begs the question, do therefore our food producing animals have a value just because of their productive capacity? Basically, is the only value that farm animals bring to society the meat, the milk and the fibre that they produce? Or do they offer us something more? Are farmed animals integral to our way of life? Are they integral to our kept environment? Are they an integral solution and not just a problem to our climate change issue at the moment? For example, is permanent pasture a good source of a carbon sink, and therefore we require grazing livestock to maintain permanent pasture in terms of addressing carbon as an issue? And as part of all of this, I believe that society does believe that animal existence has a significant worth, and that animals do have much more value over and above their productive capacity. And therefore, if you believe that as well, you the logical extension is that those of us that are vets and the entire veterinary profession therefore really has a role of leadership to play in making sure that all of these issues are addressed, not simply the health, the welfare and the productive capacity of our animals, but also that overall benefit that those animals can bring simply by existing to our overall societal success. So, to stop you nodding off, there's another question. You've been a very well-behaved audience so far. I haven't had any heckling or any difficult questions, but now it's over to you to answer a question for me. And I would love you to tell me what you think good welfare is. Is good welfare about physical fitness, sense of well-being and a life worth living? Is it about all of those things and also to have a good life? Or is it simply just to have good physical health, or even just good physical health and a sense of well-being? So what's important? So I guess at the top, we've got farm animals. As long as they've got physical health, they've got good welfare. Or as long as they've got good physical health and there's a sense that they're being well looked after, then that's enough for their good welfare. Or is it do we need to go a bit further and to suggest that they have a life worth living? And that was a sentence coined by the Farm Animal Welfare Council nearly 2 decades ago now, as they tried and strived to understand what the welfare of farm animals needed to be. So do they have a life worth living? And finally, ultimately, if we can prove that animals have a good life, is that sufficient to us having the capacity to keep farm animals for our benefit? Okay, thank you for voting. It looks like the overriding requirement is that we feel farm animals, to have good welfare, need to have physical fitness, a sense of well-being. They need to have a life that is worth living. And ultimately, more than that, they also need to have a good life. And that then begs the question, well, what is a good life and what does good welfare mean? And I would agree with everybody that voted for the top one. I think that for farm animals to have a good life and good welfare, it requires them to have physical fitness. It requires them to have well-being. They definitely need to have a life worth living. You know, in terms of their productive capacity, nobody wants to see an animal that's had a miserable life simply to produce cheap protein source for humans. But also, I think we need to think about increasingly, how can we give the animals that are kept under our care a good life? How can we make sure that they contribute more to society than simply the meat, milk and fibre that they produce as part of their productive capacity? How do they contribute to our kept environment? How do they contribute to our societal good? And how can we as vets play a good role in that? Now, I know many of you are students today, and it would be remiss of me not to have a farm animal welfare talk and not talk about the 5 freedoms. And they form a logical and comprehensive framework for us to analyse what good animal welfare means. And if you don't already know about them or haven't already learned them, I'm going to show you them in a minute. They are a classic exam question. So if you do nothing else but today, please remember and learn the 5 freedoms. Because they often come up in vivas or in written papers. But as we've said, and as I'm trying to portray, I think those 5 freedoms are just the start. They're just the minimum of what we should be doing to ensure that animals have a good life. And that is our role as vets, to ensure that we take them on that journey. So here they are. I'm not going to dwell on them too long. For those of you who love to take notes, quickly write them down now, or take a screenshot of the presentation. Obviously, it's freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, and disease, freedom to express normal behaviour, and freedom from fear and distress. And they are by default relatively broad. You know, freedom is a very broad title in itself. For an animal to be free of something, it means that you have striven to make sure that they are unaffected by those issues on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis. And when you look at some of these words, some of them are obvious around freedom from hunger and from thirst. But, you know, things like ensuring an animal is free from discomfort really requires us to work hard at making sure that the environment and the shelter and the comfort we're able to give our animal really does mean that they are free from that as an insult on their life. Same with freedom from pain, injury, and disease. This is often an area that vets think is, you know, the entirety of what they should be doing with farm animals in terms of helping to prevent and treat disease, whether it's around diagnostics or treatments. But hopefully, as you can see with the 5 freedoms, vets really should be involved in all of these different levels. Freedom to express normal behavior is also another very challenging freedom to be able to deliver. Are we able to provide enough space? Are we able to provide enough facilities for the animal to live a life that it should really want to live and need to live? A classic case, again, I come back to the fact that over the last 30 or 40 years, whether it's our poultry, our pigs, our dairy cows, or even our beef cows, we've created through genetic modification, through the advancements of breeding techniques, and through dissemination of reproductive practices such as AI and ET, we've managed to really escalate and grow the productive capacity of our animals. The milk production of an average dairy cow these days is probably somewhere in the region of 8,500 litres, but it's not uncommon for some cows to produce 15,000 litres per year per lactation. And if you go back 30 years ago, the average lactation of a cow was closer to 3,500 litres. So as you can see, we've managed to at least double, and in some cases triple or quadruple, the milk output that a dairy cow can produce over that period of time. But have we managed to match our ability to breed an animal with such a productive capacity with also the ability to keep it free of hunger and thirst, discomfort, pain, injury, and disease, allowing it to express normal behavior and keeping it free from fear and distress? So within all of this, I'm going to ask a question. What can we do as vets? What is our role at making sure that we move on from simply attesting to animal welfare and making sure that we fulfill the 5 freedoms for the animals under our care? How can we take that forward to ensure that an animal goes from simply a healthy existence right the way through, not just from a life worth living, but also to having a good life? And I would say there's lots that we can do, and I realise that I'm preaching to the converted by having you all here today. But a number of the things that you can get involved with are either as you as individually, or you as collectively, maybe as a student body, or as an active part of our wonderful profession. First of all, seek new knowledge in the area of welfare. It's an area that is always advancing, and what is recognised as good welfare today may be different to the way we recognise good welfare tomorrow. Our animal populations are changing, our customs and practices, our farming procedures are all changing at great pace. And so seeking new knowledge and better understanding what animal welfare means and the advancements in this sector is really important. If you haven't already done so, please sign up to the Animal Welfare Foundation discussion forum coming up soon. In my own area of expertise, which is agri-technology, new technologies coming around every day to help improve animal production and health. And I'm always looking at what is the improvement, animal welfare improvement from the application of some of these new technologies. And in part of this, we always have to listen to society, because we've just said how integral, you know, society feels about animal welfare and how it is so much more important than simply the productive capacity of the animals that we keep, the benefit that farmed animals bring to our society. Hopefully you've heard from me today that also I think that vets have a big role to play through the delivery of services and care of farmed animals, to embrace environmental care and to help engage with sustainability. Vets have a crucial role at helping to mitigate carbon and methane output from animals under our care, not simply from just making them more efficient, because we know already that that will help to mitigate carbon impacts, but also in terms of how we care for them, making sure their productive capacity is looked after, their health is well cared for. But also, as I've said, by default, I think that we're able to take on society's values to create that financial value through that food chain. I think the more we talk about this as an issue, the more all of you can contribute to us as a dynamic and vibrant profession, the more that people can step up and feel an ability to address these concerns and speak to, you know, our friends, our neighbours, or you know, a wider group. Feel free to, you know, go and speak to your local Cub Scout or Brownie Guide pack about the benefits that vets can bring to society by working with farm animals, because it's more than simply treating them when they get sick. So please challenge yourself, challenge your understanding about what good welfare means, and also look outside of your network. And if you do all of that, all of our constant endeavour will therefore by default be to improve the welfare of the animals under our care, because we will have accepted that welfare is fundamental to making sure that production, that health, and that financial viability is going to be part of the delivery of great welfare within our livestock populations. So I just wanted to spend the last few minutes, and I'm going to save a few minutes at the end for some questions, just to bring up some case studies and to really sort of challenge, I think, some of what might be traditional thinking around some of the areas that farm animal vets get involved in on a day-to-day basis. And the first is around reproduction. I think you'll all get told in your lectures that you know, that the cow is most productive if it has one calf every year, a 365-day calving interval. And so a lot of what we strive as a dairy vet, and this was a large part of my working life, was to ensure the reproductive capacity of the dairy cow, making sure it got back in calf within 85 days of having had that previous calf. But to do that, we really need to understand what fundamentally influences fertility. And I would say that the vet's role, therefore, is to take that understanding way past just the production, the productive capacity of getting the animal back in calf, but to think holistically about that animal's health and its welfare, because we will only maximize the fertility by ensuring that its overall health and its overall welfare is attested to. And do we therefore, as a veterinary profession, are we engaged in all of that when it comes to dairy cow reproduction? Or are we simply migrating to becoming what a colleague of mine called as a rectal tourist, somebody that's just there to administer fertility treatments, that's to manipulate the hormone cycle of cows, to help them with that reproductive capacity? If this is the case, are we really helping to prevent infertility, or are we simply there to be a technician and treat that infertility in that cow? And I think we as a veterinary profession have got a fundamental role to play around the cow's physiology, around our knowledge of how a farm animal should be cared for, looking at all the influences, the disease influences, the genetic, genomic, the inherent effects from the cow itself, but also the cow's environment, and recognizing what role that has to play. It's very easy for us as a profession to look at short-term convenience in helping dairy farmers around reproduction. There are a number of products that work phenomenally well at helping to get cows back in calf: progesterone treatments, GnRH treatments, prostaglandins, synchronization programs. But I would argue that we are doing the animal a disservice, and we're not fulfilling our obligation as a farm vet if, when we're called out to assist the farmer with a reproductive issue, or even as part of our routine fertility visit or clinic, if we don't address all the other areas of health, welfare and production on the farm as well, because many of those will be the underlying drivers behind why that cow has the fertility performance that it has. Are we managing that cow's nutrition correctly? Not just simply in the lactation, but right the way through the dry period, right the way back into the previous lactation. Are there any disease influences that are affecting the fertility? Are they understood? Are they diagnosed? And are they controlled? Have we got the animal in the right body condition in the first place? Are we monitoring body condition as part of our overall delivery of our service to farmers? If we're going along and treating farm animals with hormone preparations to try and help improve fertility capacity, if we haven't done some of the underlying understanding of the physiology of the cow, such as understanding its body condition, I think we're being remiss in the service that we are delivering. So I would say that we shouldn't be striving for dairy reproduction at all costs. Yes, I know and understand, and I'm, a big exponent of making sure, if possible, that a cow has a calf per year. There are actually very good underlying health benefits to making sure the cow, for example, does have that calf a year, doesn't have an extended lactation. Extended lactations themselves can cause problems with metabolic challenges, with cows getting too fat, or cows with other problems, for example, at low milk output levels from extended lactations. So I'm a big proponent of making sure that we keep our cows reproductive, and we do strive to try and achieve what the farmer wants to achieve, which is one calf per cow per year. But that shouldn't be at all costs, and we should absolutely take our overall role at trying to improve the overall health and welfare of that cow in its day-to-day life, from its health, from its environment, and from that will flow good fertility. The second case study I wanted to quickly talk about was calf routine husbandry. Always a great one for sending students out, disbudding or dehorning, and it might at the time seem like good sport, but actually, are we doing enough around routine calf husbandry procedures to avoid the necessity of doing them in the first place, and secondly, if it is necessary to undertake some of these procedures, whether it's castration, whether it's dehorning or disbudding, what are we doing to make sure that the animal's welfare is paramount as part of that process? The first thing to say is that certainly over my working lifetime, this has migrated from being largely a vet task to largely a task delivered by the farm staff themselves. The cost and the skill required at a very rudimentary level for doing this has meant that farmers are doing more of this themselves. The first port of call I would therefore say is, but if we are allowing farmers, producers to do these procedures themselves, are they trained to do this? Have we as a veterinary profession engaged them about the right way to tackle disbudding? Do they know and understand the importance of anaesthesia? Do they know and understand the benefit of analgesia as part of this? Have we demonstrated to them the value that an analgesia with an anaesthetic can bring when you're disbudding a calf? We don't want the farmer simply to see this as a cost that has no benefit. It's integral on us to ensure that we can demonstrate what that benefit, that financial benefit, is to that farmer, and whether that's, again, a welfare benefit which is leading to a health, to a production benefit, or whether we can simply demonstrate it in terms of an overall production benefit. That's our role as vets to do that, and we shouldn't necessarily, think that the farmer knows and understands this without our intervention. The other big area, I think, is, should we be influencing the breeding on our producers' farms more to try and, for example, encourage polled genes to be used, or bulls that leave polled calves? A number of farmers will complain that the polled breed of bulls are less productive, either in terms of their feed conversion efficiency if they're a beef animal, or their milk output if it's a dairy cow. But there are a number of things that we can do as a profession to engage the farmers around their breeding choices, using some of the data that we have available to us to try and encourage them. But there are ways and means to be able to try and avoid some of these mutilative tasks that we undertake, and so they don't become something that we just see as normal, but that we really are trying to eliminate these as challenges and as stressors on that calf's life. And we can do that by having an active engagement with our clients in this area. I've already mentioned, I think it's vital for us as vets to be teaching and training farmers and farm staff to do this sort of job with pride. Get them to understand the benefits of accurate placement of anaesthesia. Getting that right makes the job whole much easier, and I can promise you it makes the calf feel so much better at the end of the day. Adding in an analgesic as well, a painkiller, as well as simply the nerve block, is going to have significant improvements in the calf's performance. And it may be for us to demonstrate that to the producer by going and helping monitoring, the output from that calf in the immediate days after disbudding. Look at weight gain, look at feed intake, look at some of the behaviours that those calves may have in the days and weeks after disbudding, and demonstrate to the farmer that when we go the extra mile to improve that animal's welfare at that point, that will have a substantial benefit to that animal's life. And the last case study I wanted to quickly cover off is around pig production. Lots and lots of comments in the media around the way that we farm animals in the UK. Is outdoor, free range always the best? And I think we, as our profession, are in a great position to be able to influence some of that discussion and debate. And I think it's integral for us to get involved with it. We know and understand what actually creates high welfare, what actually attests best to that animal's health. And my belief is that there's no right or wrong way to farm, whether it's outdoor reared pigs or indoor reared pigs in this example. But if you look at other examples around dairy farming, is it right that we should only have grazing based cows, or is it possible also to have high welfare from indoor dairying as well? All of these are challenges that we've got to address, and we should all have an idea on how we can help society to address and understand these better. Pig production is a classic case in point. What are the inputs that we need to measure? And most importantly, what are the outputs that we're monitoring? How well do we know the health and the welfare of these animals on these different systems? And maybe we sometimes need to challenge our own understanding as to what we think is the right and wrong way to farm them. And crucially, certainly when you look at the intensive meat sectors like pigs and poultry, we are less of a doer and more of a mentor or an advisor. And so this really pushes our ability to act as an educator, to use our powers of persuasion and influence, to use our ability to know and understand research outcomes about data, and make sure that we can be that educator to convert what can be for a producer a difficult set of numbers or a difficult concept to understand coming out of research or coming out of data, and convert that into an actionable outcome through the vet as the conduit to help the farmer to turn that information into something that really benefits the animals that they're looking after. And the vet really has a crucial role to play here. And as key part of that, as we know, these are very productive. These are areas where production efficiency is absolutely paramount. And so we need to understand around the cost of production, and any farm vet really needs to know those sorts of numbers and figures intimately if they're going to be taken seriously by a farmer. But if they do know those numbers, my experience is that farmers then really do accommodate and take on when we help them and advise them around the health and the welfare and the changes and the investments that they need to make sure that our animals move from not simply just having good health, but right the way through to the spectrum where they end up having a good life on farm. Okay, you've been a very attentive audience. I didn't get any difficult questions through that presentation or any challenges, but we've just got a few minutes left today. So please, has anybody got any questions? And Alina, have any questions come through on Slido?
Not on Slido yet, but we do have one in the Q&A in Teams.
Right.
So the question is, do you feel that there is a conversation about trade-off missing, in that it isn't always possible to deliver a good life for livestock and promote productivity and efficiency at the same time? For example, fully housed dairy cows will be more efficient and have a lower GHG emission footprint, but arguably don't have the ability to express the full range of natural behaviours, such as natural grazing. Who, in your opinion, should be talking about these trade-offs? Farmers, vets, government, society?
Great question. So I'm going to take the question in reverse. So my first answer is all of the above. Everybody should be talking about whether that farming system is acceptable, and everybody should be feel sufficiently informed to enable them to come to a decision or an opinion, because there is no necessarily right or wrong answer, and we need to, therefore, us as a veterinary profession need to be active in that. I would argue that we are in a really privileged position and therefore need to be taking the leadership in this area, because we have the scientific understanding. We know and understand the physiology of the animal and their health and welfare. We know and understand farming systems and the importance of productive capacity. And we are ourselves citizens and part of our society, and we'll have our own opinions about what the right way to keep those animals are. In that particular case study that was given, I would argue that we've got to look very, very carefully, first of all, at the ability of the farmer themselves. What is their ability to deliver good welfare, and under what system? We also have to look a little bit around the geography, because it's really important to understand, how different farming systems work in different geographies. Is it good welfare, for example, to have animals out grazing if they're just going to have a miserable existence because the environmental temperatures is too hot or too wet at certain times of the year? The other thing we've got to think very carefully about is what sort of farm animal have we developed? And you might argue that some of the very high producing dairy cows that we've bred, we can argue about the ethics about whether that's right or wrong. But what we do know is that some of those animals aren't capable of grazing, and they're certainly not capable of grazing to meet their metabolic output. So for those very, very high yielding dairy cows, it might be that we keep them indoors because that they are effectively being bred as an indoor animal only. And effectively, we've bred out some of that grazing behavior in some of those high producing animals. As I say, I'm not advocating that, and there is a big, strong ethical debate to have around whether that's acceptable. But we do. The ultimate answer to the question is everybody needs to get involved, and the veterinary profession and everybody here needs to take a position of leadership and come to an opinion about what some of these things are and how we're going to address them.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. We've got a couple more questions on Slido.
Great.
How realistic is it to hope for improved welfare when population increase is increasing pressure on productivity? What tech is coming down the line?
And another great question. Yes, it's a challenge, because the global global population is growing. Somewhere by the region of another 2 billion people on this planet over the next 30 years. And unless we're going to dictate to people about what they should and shouldn't eat, we know that as the world becomes wealthier people consume more meat and milk. They consume more animal-based protein. And my understanding is that the alternative proteins, are less likely to meet the need of our growing global population. So are we all going to be drinking soya milk or oat milk? There are a number of challenges, to those areas. So so it is incumbent on us to think about how we're going to produce animals for the future. And as I've mentioned today, that's not just about their health and welfare, but we have to be mindful to the carbon impacts. I fundamentally believe, for example, that those countries that have good knowledge in this sector should be taking the leadership. And we as a country have phenomenally advanced knowledge around the health and welfare of our animals. We have the most advanced governmental intervention. We have some of the best animal welfare charities. We have the best veterinary schools and universities and some of the strongest agricultural academic institutions. So it's absolutely essential for us to take those forwards. There will be challenges, though. If we said today that poultry production, intensive poultry production in Thailand, and then shipping that chicken to the UK has a lower carbon footprint than our outdoor reared chicken here in the UK, then that unfortunately would probably be the case. But would the consumer want intensively reared chicken reared in Thailand as part of their zinger burger on a Friday night on the way home from the pub, or would they really much prefer a free range chicken produced here in the UK? Well, unless we as an industry get involved with the education and start to talk about some of these areas, the consumer will never know. And I can promise you that once you've had 2 or 3 pints on a Friday night, your care for where that chicken's come from may well change, and certainly if there's a cost implication, that may also have a variance. But we are able to address both, as I've said today, both the welfare and the health and the productive capacity and the efficiency here in the UK with the knowledge and expertise that we've got. We just need to get involved.
Excellent. Maybe are you happy to answer one more?
Of course.
More
I'm
question?
happy to stay on. I've got 5 minutes.
Okay. Beautiful. This one from Alexandra. Other than citing production costs and possible husbandry alternatives that are still lucrative, what do you suggest are the best ways to address and promote welfare when engaging with farmers, particularly those who may be more traditional in values and production?
Yeah. That's a great question. How do we engage them? The first and foremost thing you've got to do is to engender trust. So you've got to demonstrate to the producer that you know and understand their system, and doing as much background information around them, but particularly around, for example, their costs of production. What are their pain points in terms of rearing the animals for meat or milk that they are undertaking? And if you can show some empathy, then you'll quickly build that level of trust up. My experience in my working life is once you build that trust with farmers, they increasingly will accept some of the challenges you might need to bring. The challenges around production are quite easy to bring because hopefully they can immediately see the financial gain that they're going to achieve by adopting what you say. Many farmers will adopt the health opportunities that you bring. They'll accept and know that you are the guardian, the custodian, the reliable source of health information. So if you recognise a treatment course, a particular vaccination, or a way of managing the herd or flock to reduce disease, that will immediately be taken on board. Around welfare, I accept it's more challenging, especially if it's your first time on the farm. Clearly, absolute welfare challenges need to be called out straight away. It's unacceptable if you see, for example, a very lame cow that's not being addressed immediately. But what you can do, I think, is if you can go on that personal journey yourself around understanding the productive capacity and the health impacts on that farm, it will give you that gravitas to be able to then address some of those welfare issues as well, and then encourage the farmer to understand what we've been talking about today about how overall society, and if they create the human value in looking after the animal, that by default the financial value will also follow.
Brilliant.
Any more questions?
I think there are a couple more, but perhaps we should wrap up because we've gone over the hour, but thank you so much, Matt. That was brilliant. Thanks everyone for attending, and yeah, keep an eye on our social media and the website, because we'll have more of these webinars which will be open to everyone. So it'd be great to have you back.
So Alina, this has been recorded. For those people that want to watch the recording again or want to share the recording with colleagues, how can they do that?
Will it be sent out, Maureen?
Yes. Sorry.
Great.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think it'll be emailed out to everyone that's registered. So feel free to share it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Listen, thank you so much for everybody for joining today. Feel free to contact me. You can find my contact details on LinkedIn or via my website. Love to help any of you if you're on a life journey around improving welfare of animals. And please do get involved however you can with Animal Welfare Foundation. Come to the discussion forum, apply for one of our research grants, subscribe to our social media channels or our newsletters. It's a great organisation, really focused on improving the welfare of animals that are under our care.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.